To their fans, they might have seemed unstoppable, but the Smiths were a band built on shaky foundations.
To explain why, we're going to have to rewind all the way back to the start.
You can write what you like. I'm not a session player. I'm the drummer in the Smiths.
I'm Steve Lamack.
And I'm Elizabeth Holker.
This is The Rise and Fall of the Smiths. Episode 5, Money Changes Everything.
I'd written the riff. I was at my parents' house on a Sunday evening, and at that time it sounded almost like a Nile Rodgers riff. And I loved the chords and I loved the rhythm, and I had no way of recording it. Angie, who was then my girlfriend, came round in her parents' little Volkswagen Beetle. She would have been 17, just passed her driving test. I just said, we've got to go to Morris's now. Got to go to Morris's. He's got a tape recorder. I've got this riff. So I got in the car with this guitar and I kept playing it so I wouldn't forget it, and had my feet on the dashboard because of the front seat. Angie normally just leaves me to it, but in this case, she really likes Iggy Pop, right? Still to this day. At some point, she just said to me, "Make it sound like Iggy." By the time I got around Morris's, I knocked on the door. I just went in the hallway, kneeling down, and I put it down. Bang, 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 bang. And then we were rehearsing, maybe on the Tuesday or something, and we started playing it, and he started singing on top of it. And it was one of those times all four of us were just looking around at each other with the most wild kind of grin.
Once the band had written Hand in Glove, they knew it needed to be their debut single. But they first needed to find someone to release it. Johnny and Morrissey had set their hearts on the independent record label Rough Trade, based in London and run by Jeff Travis. And so one day, cassette in hand, Johnny and Andy got on the train to London.
When we made Hand in Glove, I was like, right, I'm done with this. I'm just going to take matters into my own hands, and I went down to Rough Trade and I got the brush off from the receptionist. I went round the back into the loading bay and just looked like I was being very busy loading records and all of that. And until I saw Jeff Travis, and he came out, and I actually grabbed him by the sleeve, this little tiny northerner, and I just babbled at him with genuine belief that he should hear it. And he said he'll listen to it over the weekend, and he was true to his word. He called first thing on the Monday morning and said, "I think it's fantastic, let's put it out."
Rough Trade backing the Smiths was a big deal. It rewrote the rules. For the first time, an indie label had a band that could go toe-to-toe with the majors. And some say this is where British indie rock, as we know it, really began. But behind the scenes, the paperwork was far from straightforward, and it was the manager's job to deal with that. The Smiths' first manager was a man called Joe Moss, a total music obsessive, but with no real experience of managing bands. As drummer Mike Joyce points out, Joe's main area of expertise, trousers.
He owned Crazy Face shop on Portland Street. Did some fantastic line in black jeans that we all used to blag off him.
Johnny Marr, a sharp dresser even then, was working at the boutique next door to Crazy Face. This is Joe recalling the moment they met in a rare BBC interview from 1999.
Young lad bounds in, didn't know him, says, "Hi, my name's Johnny Marr. I'm a frustrated musician." He was magnetic, Johnny.
Mike Joyce.
Him and Johnny used to really buzz off each other.
Bassist Andy says that Joe encouraged Johnny to form a band, and he even let the Smiths rehearse in the room above his clothes shop.
And then I think when he heard the demos and he heard us rehearsing, because he's such a music lover, he couldn't help himself but get involved and take a chance on us sort of thing, so he did invest in us.
Guitarist Johnny Marr.
You know, he'd put everything he had into us when there was no promise of anything really, so, you know, you can't get much more loyal than that.
Joe knew the band was special, and he was thinking big.
We were on a mission. We were taking the world on.
But when it came to finalising the details of the Rough Trade record deal, not everyone was on the same page. Rough Trade's Jeff Travis arrived at Joe Moss's clothing warehouse contract in hand. What happened next would have repercussions in years to come. Drummer Mike Joyce.
There was a dispute as to how the deal was signed. My recollection is of a certain way and Johnny Morris's is of another way, and I'm sure the window cleaner at the time that was cleaning the windows, that was having a look in, probably would have said something different as well.
Andy Rourke.
The way I saw it was Jeff came down with the contracts and it was in Joe's office at Crazy Face. Read through all the contracts and all that, and you got to the last page and there was only 2 spaces for the signatures. Me and Mo like, what's all this about? And Jeff explained to us that there was only 2 signatures needed, so the obvious ones would be Johnny and Morrissey, but it wouldn't affect us in any way. And being, 18 and green, we went along with it. You live and learn.
The contract may have only had 2 signatures, Johnny and Morrissey, but the contract also said the deal was between the label and the Smiths. The question was, who exactly were the Smiths? It was a question that would become crucial years later, but a question drummer Mike Joyce felt there was a clear answer to.
What I didn't know, and which I found out, is that Johnny and Morrissey wrote on a little card around that time that they were the Smiths. Everybody else around them can be sacked at any point, and they both signed it in the presence of Joe. You can write what you like. I'm not a session player. I'm the drummer in the Smiths. The Smiths signed a deal with Rough Trade. Johnny and Morrissey sign it. I've signed a deal with Rough Trade.
Here's Rough Trade's Jeff Travis speaking in 1999.
When I went to Manchester with the Rough Trade contract, I was fully expecting it to be signed by all 4 members. But at the point of signature, in the clothing warehouse, Johnny Morrissey signed it and gave it back to me. And it became apparent in that second that there was a divide in terms of the way Johnny and Morrissey perceived the business aspects of the group.
Here's Johnny Marr, also speaking in 1999.
Had there been the entire England football team's name on there, it wouldn't have bothered me. What bothered me was that we were going to make 2 albums or 3 albums or 4 albums. That's all I was worried about.
However it came to be that only 2 names ended up on the Smiths contract, Morrissey later claimed it was fair. Writing in his autobiography, he says, "The Rough Trade contract was signed by Johnny and I as the Smiths because the name and the project, with all of its ideas and concerns and worries, were ours alone and no one else's." Although Andy and Mike would soon rally around the flag, they hadn't yet, and both still looked askance at this funny little Smiths gamble with their eyes agape for better opportunities.
On one October morning in Manchester, Morrissey and Marr, deep in conversation, wove through the bustle of Piccadilly on their way to Pluto Studios. The topic, money. Specifically, how to divide it. It was something that still hadn't been decided. According to Marr's autobiography, it was there, amid the swirl of commuters and pigeons, that they settled on the numbers. 40% each for the 2 of them, and 10% each for Mike and Andy. A reflection of who did what. Simple in theory, but thorny in practice. And they hadn't told the others yet.
So our different stars ignite. So our different stars ignite.
Later, in the middle of their recording session for What Difference Does It Make?, Morrissey vanished. No word, no explanation, just gone.
We were doing a vocal on the first album, and then he nipped out for some water or some crisps or something, and then half an hour went by and he wasn't back, and then another half an hour went by and he still wasn't back. I was thinking, oh right. And 2 hours went by and 3 hours went by, and we didn't know where he was. Later on that evening, we got a phone call from Jeff Travis at Rough Trade saying he's in Rough Trade and he's not coming back until you sort out the business of who was going to get what. So he didn't come back until the business was sorted out. It was either it gets agreed on or there's no band, you know.
According to manager Joe Moss, Morrissey wanted clarity on the financial side of things.
Before he moved on with the band, he wanted to have it firmly established as to what each person was going to be earning out of it. As far as he was concerned, that was Johnny's job to do that with Mike and Andy.
Mike and Andy recall being presented with an ultimatum.
Johnny Marr came in and said, Morrissey wants me and him to get a higher percentage.
Morrissey wanted me and Mike to take a lesser share than they had. No actual figures were mentioned.
And Johnny said, if you don't accept it, I'm going to leave the band.
The biggest thing I remember about that night is just trying to sort Johnny out of leaving the band because it was such a special thing. It was just a very emotional night.
So me and Andy and Joe Moss all convinced Johnny to stay. In the middle of a recording session, what difference does it make? Very important. Let's just do that. And that's what we did. It never came up again.
Morrissey and Marr took this conversation to mean that the issue was sorted, but nothing was written down. No contracts, no signatures, just assumptions, the kind that would come back to bite them. Here's manager Joe Moss.
It's well documented that Morrissey doesn't like to write things down. As far as Morrissey was concerned, that was sorted out then.
We touched on this already, but it's worth underlining. They were all still so young. The music came naturally, but the business side of things was another story.
When you first start off, as any band will tell you, to have a record contract is the holy grail. We were just, wow, we're making this record. Isn't it all fantastic? And you're not thinking about how the money's going to be carved up. You're not anticipating millions of pounds coming through the door. It's just the same old story. You never get that sorted out when you first start. On paper, it doesn't occur to you.
But for manager Joe Moss, the issue wasn't money, it was trust. When Morrissey took his concerns to the label instead of to Joe, something snapped. Joe had backed this band, and now he felt cut out.
As soon as Jeff Travis was speaking to me, I knew that, well, that was it for me then. Because, you know, if Morrissey couldn't come to me to sort that out, which I would have sorted it out for him without question, because that was the role, that there was too much of a division then for me to be able to stay. And I realised that if I stayed, that it was going to put a strain on Morrissey's relationship with Johnny.
And so, as we heard in the last episode, just as they were about to go on that first American tour, the man who'd been holding it all together was gone. Here's touring sound engineer Grant Showbiz again.
The warmth and the love that he kind of spread about, there was a big space where that should have been. Everything had been done to this backdrop of Joe will sort it out. Stupid things like food. Like finding food that Morrissey would want to eat, or that any of the band would want to eat, because they weren't used to exotic, strange, foreign foods. Joe would have taken care of that. Joe would always make sure that everyone was comfortable and happy. You don't know how much irritation and bad stuff there is out there until the person who's been keeping it away from you disappears. And then suddenly it all seems like irritation and bad stuff.
But the real problem wasn't just that Joe left, it's that no one replaced him.
One of the things that wore me down was that after Joe, we didn't have a manager. So me and Morrissey were doing it, and people from Rough Trade were helping out in sort of various administrative capacities.
Without a proper manager, it was Johnny who ended up taking on a lot of that work. Why was the guitarist managing the band? Why, after Joe Moss, did no one ever properly fill that role?
I wanted Joe to stay, you know. We really needed a manager, it's ridiculous.
Next time, Morrissey versus the press.
Popular music should be used in order to make serious statements.
The controversial headlines.
I can't deny that it does upset me and distress me.
It's just such a taboo subject to write about.
And the chaos behind the scenes.
You knew there was going to be an almighty stink about it.
I just thought it was the wrong thing to do.
The Smiths were approached but declined to take part. Morrissey disputes some of the recollections featured.
Music.
The rise and fall of the Smiths.
Popular
nuclear music should be used in order to make serious statements, especially in these serious times.
Sweetness, I was only joking.
Morrissey has always had a fascinating relationship with the press. Endlessly quotable, witty and provocative. The papers couldn't get enough.
So many groups sell masses and masses of records and don't raise people's level of consciousness in any direction, and we find that quite sinful.
But while he had brought the band enormous media attention, it wasn't without consequence.
I can't deny that it does upset me and distress me.
This is the rise and fall of the Smiths.
Episode 6, Bigmouth Strikes Again.
Morrissey says it was a BBC documentary he stumbled upon as a boy that fundamentally changed him. We can't be certain which programme it was, but all signs point to this BBC documentary, One Man's Meat, presented by Trevor Philpott.
Some of us are a little squeamish about the sight of blood on our plate, but one way or another we like dead cattle. So the animal is about to be executed.
It was that BBC documentary that set Morrissey on a path to vegetarianism, a conviction that would shape the Smiths' second studio album, Meat is Murder.
This beautiful creature must die. This beautiful creature must die.
A year on from the release of their debut album, Smiths' mania had only grown. Devoted fans were eagerly awaiting the follow-up, and in February 1985, Meat is Murder went straight to number 1 in the UK album charts. It was a critical hit as well. Paul Du Noyer in The NME wrote the Smiths' artistic achievement is genuinely beyond doubt. As a unit, they've never sounded so sure, so confident. But not everybody was happy.
The UK's favourite DJs. Saturday Live. Radio 1.
21 minutes past 4, Saturday Live. That is Meat is Murder, the title track from the new Smiths LP. If you just joined us, we're talking to Morrissey and Johnny Marr about the album. And Morrissey, we were just talking about the LP title, its importance. Yeah. It seems a bit of a sort of simplistic bit of sloganising, though, in a way, isn't it?
Yes, it can seem that way. I think we'll ultimately prove that it's not, really.
How would you like people to react then to the title of this LP?
Well, if they eat meat, I'd like them just to think about it and just to take it from there, really.
It's such an angry record, the words
Yes,
are so
it
angry.
is.
Morrissey had previously said that one of his favourite Oscar Wilde quotes is, "The artist must educate the critic." A piece of advice he's never been scared to follow. Johnny Marr.
He had his politics, his stuff he would talk about, and I was a fan, I was really into it. What's going to happen next, you know? It was great as long as I could do what I wanted to do musically and steer the band musically where I thought we should go.
Drummer Mike Joyce.
99.9% of the time, I agreed with what he was saying. So I was perfectly happy for him to do that and to take that kind of control.
But speaking his mind sometimes came at a cost.
Now, what about this LP? Are you ready for what could be a critical backlash, which seems to so often happen with the music press on a successful group's second LP?
I think we hope that it's actually over, because as far as we can see, it started quite a long time ago.
Morrissey's long and tangled history with Fleet Street actually began with the first track on their very first album, a song called Reel Around the Fountain. In September 1983, a Conservative MP lodged a complaint with the BBC objecting to what he described as the deviant nature of the Smiths' lyrics. The Sun published a sensational article by Nick Ferrari under the headline "Banned Child Sex Pop Song" because of lyrics such as these.
It's time the tale were told of how you took a child and you made him old.
Here's bassist Andy Rourke.
The Sun laid into it, yeah. We were all labelled child molesters for a few weeks, yeah. You know, when a record comes out, you expect, you know, your parents to be proud, and then when something comes out like that, a lot of people are so shallow, they believe, you know, everything they read anyway.
Morrissey argued that the song was simply about the loss of childhood innocence. But at the same time, the press also took issue with a track called Suffer Little Children, a song Morrissey had written about the Moors murders.
On these bleak and desolate moorlands, 1,600 feet up in the Pennines, senior police officers believe they'll find 2 more bodies, possibly a third.
In the mid-1960s, 5 children from the Manchester area had been kidnapped and murdered by Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, a story that shocked the nation, and some of the victims had been buried on Saddleworth Moor.
20 detectives and 3 dogs concentrated on the rocky outcrop just alongside the main Manchester-Barnsley Road, where the body of 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey was found on Saturday night.
Anne West was the mother of one of the victims. The Sun newspaper approached her to comment on the Smith song, and she was quoted as saying, "Whoever wrote the song must be as sick as the killers." Here's Johnny Marr.
That song was written on the first ever songwriting session. It was the second song that we wrote. I think the line that most struck me though was Manchester, so much to answer for.
Oh, Manchester, so much to answer for. Edward, see those alluring lines.
Suffer Little Children wasn't some shock tactic. For all 4 band members, it was personal. They'd grown up in the shadow of the Moors murders.
One of the kids lived a few doors down from my gran.
The body is tentatively identified as that of an 11-year-old girl, but a post-mortem is being conducted later. This morning,
the first time I had a sense of depravity.
After Morrissey spoke to Anne West about the song, she retracted her statement, saying Morrissey can write a song about my daughter anytime he wants. But by that point, shops including Boots and Woolworths had pulled the Smiths' debut album from their shelves.
Obviously, the backlash against the Smiths arrived quite recently, and which I found terribly distressing because it seemed to me suddenly so full of absolute hate, and I couldn't really understand this within the relatively short sphere of time that we'd been around, and we hadn't changed that much, yet suddenly the people who were applauding us were spitting at us.
But it wasn't just the tabloids and politicians who took issue with Morrissey's lyrics. When Panic was released in 1986, radio DJs across the country bristled.
I was very happy with Panic. I think that was probably the best thing I think the Smiths have done, for me.
They really resented having to play us, especially when we were singing Hand the DJ.
When we came to do Panic, I just thought that's the best title I've ever seen written down for a pop record. I thought he was brilliant. It's an overused word, but I thought he was truly brilliant.
By the time Panic came out, the Smiths were at their popular peak. They'd just released their 3rd, by some distance, their biggest selling album. And if the title, Meat is Murder, had ruffled some establishment feathers, it was nothing compared to The Queen is Dead. But it wasn't just the music that was making headlines, there were also Morrissey's interviews.
4 people are dead and dozens injured after the bomb at the Conservative Party hotel in Brighton. But the IRA failed in what they set out to do. They were trying to murder the Prime Minister and most of the British cabinet as they slept. But Mrs. Thatcher escaped death by minutes.
The 1984 bombing of the Grand Hotel by the IRA, which eventually accounted for 5 fatalities, including 1 Tory MP. In response, Morrissey was quoted as saying, "The sorrow of the Brighton bombing is that Thatcher escaped unscathed. The sorrow is that she is still alive." You can imagine the uproar that followed. His Brighton bombing quote, for instance, wasn't the only time that he appeared to support violence as a form of protest.
Animal rights groups are never taken seriously, but in order to be taken seriously, they have to do something that's absolutely violent. I mean, it's the same with other groups like CND. You have to do something that's absolutely violent, otherwise people just snigger at you.
He even had strong views on violence against oneself. Quoted in the magazine Square Peg, he said, "I look upon suicide as this incredibly brave thing," going on to say that he'd even considered it himself. As you can hear here, mental health in the 1980s wasn't something talked about in the way it is today.
But Morrissey, you've said some very unguarded things over the past 12
Yes.
months. I mean, the famous quote, you know, how you contemplated suicide. I bet you regretted that, didn't you?
No, I don't regret it. No, I mean, that was quite serious. But no, it's difficult when, with me, for better or worse, people do rigidly take notice. I find, certainly journalists do, wait for the next word. It's a very curious way to live.
Johnny Marr believes that with hindsight, Morrissey's relationship with the press was something of a double-edged sword.
I won't say it was our downfall, but I think it was a blind spot of the Smiths, being so occupied with the media and notoriety, particularly one certain member of the group. I think that could have been dialed down a bit and would have helped the group out.
Morrissey described that time as one where quotes shoot out from the press like darts, and my life is no longer my own. But while the tabloids pored over his public image and obsessed about his ambiguous sexuality, the band were left dealing with a very different kind of fallout, the disruption being caused behind the scenes. Johnny Marr.
A couple of times we got to the airport to go on tour, and someone from Rough Trade would say, "It's not happening, he's gone home." You knew there was going to be an almighty stink about it. There was another time when we were supposed to do some TV show or something, and he just wouldn't come out of his room.
The Smiths engineer, Grant Showbiz.
Really trying to get Morrissey to do something became the game, you know. I can really remember, like on the last American tours, getting Morrissey to go on stage was this incredible event. You know, there's 10,000 people out there, they're going mad, we've got to go on stage. And Morrissey would be like, well, I don't really feel like it. Or he'd just not be there.
Bassist Andy Rourke.
Morrissey's pretty much unmanageable. Yeah, of course it pissed us off. And each time you compromise yourself, then the more that person gets away with. Morrissey would ask somebody to do something, and if they didn't, then they were fired.
I mean, there was this amazing thing where we used to keep changing hotels. You know, we'd get to a hotel, oh no, we can't stay here. Can't stay here, horrible hotel, we'll have to go to another hotel. And then, you know, Morrissey would be in one area of the hotel and we'd be in the other area of the hotel. And it was the beginning of there being this actual physical thing where Morrissey and Johnny weren't together as much. They'd always been very, very close. And, you know, you'd look around and you'd see them together in the corner chatting. And suddenly that wasn't happening anymore.
People used to act very weird around us, you know. People used to be very nervous, and that used to make me feel a bit uncomfortable. I don't really get off on making other people feel insecure. I think that's kind of ugly, you know.
Last time we heard how Joe Moss, their manager, left the band, but had they had a manager now, perhaps a lot of this strife behind the scenes could have been, well, managed. But according to Johnny, after Joe left, Morrissey made sure no one else got close. In the Face magazine in 1990, Morrissey made his view clear. We just wanted to be helped along with our own ideas, and managers are never capable of doing that. They can't resist meddling. Johnny Marr.
It's pretty evident that he didn't want anyone who was our manager. He didn't think they were right for whatever reason. A person would come into the frame and the next minute they're gone. And that started to really wear me down.
I won't share you.
Morrissey's legal team said their clients has never had any difficulty going on stage, never refused to play a scheduled show, never refused to travel, and never had any resistance to management.
Without a manager, Johnny was left to hold things together, creatively, logistically, emotionally. But it couldn't last. And slowly, despite all the success and adulation, a thought began to creep in. What if I just walked away?
It just got too much, and I just wanted to play guitar in a band. It started to just come to my mind over a period of like maybe 18 months that there is one solution.
Next time, the breakup.
There was bound to be the one final confrontation, wasn't there? And, you know, I wasn't going to have it.
The rise and fall of the Smiths.
6 Music.
This programme contains adult themes.
Oh, mother, I can feel the sorrow falling over my head.
It was the news that shook the music world. From the outside, the Smiths seemed unstoppable. They appeared to be at the peak of their powers. But suddenly, in the spring of 1987, in a London fish and chip shop, the music stopped.
I know it's over.
Johnny just said, I want to leave the band. Simple as that.
I'm Elizabeth Holker.
And I'm Steve Lemack, and this is The Rise and Fall of the Smiths, Episode 7, I Know It's Over.
Of Morrissey's choice. So what have you got planned musically for 87?
Well, as much as possible, really. I hope it will be a very hectic, blistering year.
And you've worked on the next album?
We're beginning to.
1 month before that fish and chip shop encounter, the Smiths were in Somerset, recording what none of them knew would be their final album, Strange Ways, Here We Come.
They seemed to me to be in a very good place when we started that record.
This is Stephen Street. Stephen had a long working relationship with the band and was brought in to produce Strange Ways.
There seemed to be a lot of happiness and laughter. It was quite funny, we had quite a laugh.
Johnny Marr.
We did the last album, which is actually my favourite album. Making it wasn't that bad, actually. It wasn't too bad.
Mike Joyce.
Strange Ways was probably one of the best sessions we ever did. Some of the best songs that the Smiths ever made are on that last album.
In a 2021 BBC interview, Johnny Marr was asked for his favourite Smiths song. The answer was immediate.
Oh yes, last night I dreamt Somebody Loved Me, because it doesn't sound like any other rock band. I don't think. It could only been done by us. It's an example of everyone in the band being just brilliant. The record, when I hear it, regardless of the words, is just my feelings blown up on a gothic scale.
So tell me how long before the last one.
Beneath the laughter and late night sessions, Johnny's unease was building, and producer Stephen Street says it was beginning to show.
Most of the time, it worked very, very well. There was only one time I remember working on the album when Johnny was doing some guitars. I remember the following day taking a rough mix of it on the cassette and took it round to Morrissey in his room. And Morrissey came back to me shortly afterwards and said, no, he didn't like it.
Johnny Marr remembers it well.
It was kind of serious because it happened. It was just a matter of like one guitar part that had been put in, and the engineer said, oh, he doesn't like it. So I said, well, tell him to fucking come up with something then, and he can go and fuck himself while he's at it, or words to that effect, and so that was that sorted.
You could tell perhaps at this point he was getting a little bit to the end of his tether.
But aside from the occasional flare-up, Mike Joyce remembers the Strange Ways sessions as surprisingly smooth.
When people talk about Strange Ways, when there was stories around at the time saying, oh yeah, they had massive arguments. Absolute nonsense.
As far as I was concerned, I finished the album, we left the studio, I said goodbye to everyone, I went back to London, they went back to Manchester or wherever. And then about 5 weeks later, I get this message come through from Rough Trade, have you heard that they've broken up? I was like, what?
But directly after making it, things started to get a bit weird. The atmosphere was really weird between us. Musically and personally, I found myself going in a different direction to the band. I felt musically we were just going to end up repeating ourselves and being a parody, really. I remember saying to the guys, we're going to end up like the Beach Boys in those blue and white shirts with our quiffs. We've got to sort of think different here. And I was sort of felt tied down by what had become supposedly my sound. The first track on the last album doesn't have any guitars on it, but you would never know. And it still sounds like the Smiths. So I knew it could be done.
They said there's too much caffeine in your bloodstream and a lack of real spice in your life. I said, leave me alone because I'm alright now.
But it wasn't just about the music. For 5 straight years, the band had been writing, recording and touring relentlessly without much assistance. And by this point, Johnny was exhausted.
And I said, right, well, that's it now. we've done this album, this is our 5th album, and then, 7 if you count all the compilations and all that. I fancied a 2-week holiday, and I was just treated like a pariah. And I thought, right, well, with all the crap that's going on, managers coming and going like it was a revolving door, the weird atmosphere around the band, plus musically, I was starting to want to do other things. I thought now's the right time for it to finish,
Things finally came to a head at, of all places, a fish and chip shop called Gilles in London's Notting Hill.
We had a band meeting at Gilles because we used to do chips and peas. Being good northern lads, you can't beat it, chips and peas.
Mike Joyce says Johnny had something he wanted to get off his chest.
So we sat down and Johnny said, "I've had enough." So I was like, gob full of chips. Like, what?
Bassist Andy Rourke was stunned.
I just remember thinking, we're just going for some fish and chips. And then I don't think I finished my fish and chips, put it that way. It was like somebody pulling your stomach out through your ass. That horrible sinking feeling, and you just think it's going to go on forever.
I didn't really believe he meant it.
Yeah, everyone was just really freaked out. It was like a death in the family sort of thing.
But Johnny says it wasn't quite as clear-cut as that.
So I think we should rethink where we're going to go musically and think about what we're going to do in the future. And for once, it was just like this brick wall that just did not connect with what I was saying. And I was like, am I speaking a foreign language here?
Whatever was said, the rest of the band felt the message was clear. Johnny was done.
And I said, well, we can do one more album, at least. And I think that was the worst thing I could have said. I don't think he could actually kind of make us feel just how upset he was.
And so it was like, no, we've got to go in the studio. I was like, why? Just finished an album. No, we've got to go in the studio right now. And this sort of really strange panic set into everybody. No, we've got to go in now.
Morrissey, Andy and Mike urged Johnny back into the studio to at least finish off some B-sides for their next single, Girlfriend in a Coma. And Johnny reluctantly agreed.
We went into our friend's studio, I thought, well, let's keep it low-key then,
That friend was touring sound engineer Grant Showbiz. He had a studio in Streatham in South London, and it was here that the band's final ever recording session would unfold.
I did the last recording session ever with them when they broke up, And of course, it was awful. There's always ups and downs in recording sessions. This just started out really badly, and it was terrifying. And it was a consummation of that pain that Morrissey was feeling, of like, Johnny, please stay, but if you're not going to stay, well, I'm going to push you away. So those two things, please stay. Oh, fuck off then. Almost simultaneously.
And it was just torture that last week. It was hell. I thought, this is horrible.
No one was talking to anyone. There was no communication. It didn't seem to me that there was ever the four of them were ever in the room at the same time. Morrissey was drinking during the day. Never seen that. I was frightened of Morrissey. Suddenly there was Morrissey a little bit drunk, waving a bottle about, and I was like, what's he going to do, he was upset. He's like, let's go and do it now. And Johnny would be standing there going, do what? We haven't got any songs. And he was like, Cilla Black, let's do a Cilla Black cover, And it was like the last thing Johnny wanted to do.
Cilla Black was part of the 60s pop scene Morrissey adored, one of the many female voices that helped shape the early Smiths sound.
There are girls that some men will slave for to provide the things that they crave for. Why do you think work is a four-letter word?
Yes, why do you think work is a four-letter word? Is that a thinly veiled message for an exhausted Johnny? We can only speculate.
But we went in and did work as a four-letter word, and then we did this song, I Keep Mine Hidden, which I think is a direct song to Johnny, and it's a very revealing song of Morrissey. It's one of the songs where he's sort of saying, you seem to treat life so easily, but here I am, I'm very depressed, and I can't tell you any of it.
I keep mine hidden, but it's so easy for you, because you let your slave and depend on bleed with you.
According to Grant, Johnny's heart just wasn't in it.
You know, I'm used to watching Johnny stick in the studio for weeks on end doing a guitar riff. And suddenly it was like, oh, I've done it. And I think it probably lasted about a week, and then Johnny went to America. And that was it.
So off I went, and never looked back.
But was it really the end? Because according to Grant and Andy, Johnny had never explicitly said he was quitting, only that he was taking a 2-week holiday.
He didn't really say that he was leaving, you know, he just went to America to get a bit of space.
What Johnny told me was that he never actually left the band. I think he more or less had a nervous breakdown. I'd had enough of all the pressure and everything and needed a break. And he went on holiday for a couple of weeks.
It's possible it had all been a big misunderstanding with motions running high and wires crossed over chips and peas. But whatever had been said, it was what Johnny came back to that was the final nail in the coffin.
A week before he came back, there was a story, I don't know who put it out, in the Enemy that Johnny had left the band.
On the 1st of August 1987, the Enemy printed it in black and white. Smiths to split.
So he came back and he was obviously pissed off and said, right, fuck it then, yeah, I have left the band. It was all a bit of a ball of confusion that went, horribly wrong in the end, I think. It could have been sorted out, but it wasn't. And I don't know if it ever will be,
By this point, Johnny was despondent.
I didn't know what I was going to do at all. I had no idea, but I thought, it's all right. Signing on is better than this, really. I was happier when I was signing on. And I just thought I was looking into sort of a void, not a sob story or anything. I just didn't know what I was going to do. There was no plan.
Morrissey's legal team said the breakup of the Smiths had been amicable, and also that Morrissey couldn't have been drinking, as Grant describes, as he didn't drink alcohol until 1993.
Where do we go from here? What does it feel like when something that's been your entire life
Well, we're trying
finishes?
to carry on. When a quarter of something that you love has been taken away, then as far as I was concerned, there's still 3/4 left.
Yeah.
So wrongly, trying to carry on.
It was clasping at straws, wasn't it? Totally, just like a knee-jerk reaction, I think, because you just want to desperately try and keep some of it going.
With Johnny gone, the 3 remaining members of the band brought in Ivor Perry as a replacement.
I went in the studio to do some demos with Stephen Street and Ivor Perry, and it was all right. Well, it was shit, really. It was all right, but it was shit.
It was never the same, really, you know what I mean? It just felt like playing with like an arm missing, just because Johnny wasn't there. It just never felt right.
And I remember saying to Stephen Street, I just keep wanting Johnny to walk in.
And I think it was then we realised that unless it was all 4 of us, it just really wasn't going to happen. So we had to let it go.
In Tony Fletcher's Smiths biography, Johnny is quoted as saying, "To be replaced so quickly by your friends, before you've even had the chance to change your mind, it was the end of it. It really, really hurt." Their producer Stephen Street thinks the breakup was avoidable though.
What needed to happen at the end of us doing Strange Ways Here We Come was 2 things. One was they needed to take a break, and secondly, they had to agree on having a manager that could plan for the future. If that had happened, I swear that they would not have split up at that time. But Morrissey wouldn't allow it to happen because he's contrary.
After 5 wild years, dozens of unforgettable songs, sell-out shows around the world, and near permanent interest from the press, suddenly it all stopped. But the drama didn't end there. Next time.
We went in, we stood up, and the clerk of the court said, "All rise, Joyce versus Morrissey and others." And I thought, oh, this is me and my friends. And I hated it. I hated every single bloody minute of it.
The Smiths were approached but declined to take part. Morrissey disputes some of the recollections featured.
I mean, the court case kind of album must have... Did that sour things irredeemably, do you think, Mark?
Oh, no, don't be silly. Yes.
A decade after they last played, the Smiths were reunited, but not on stage. This time, it's in London's Royal Courts of Justice.
It's almost like a sort of fitting end to the Smiths, really. You know, the drama didn't stop until 12 years after.
I'm Steve Lamack.
And I'm Elizabeth Holker.
And this is the final episode of the rise and fall of the Smiths.
Episode 8, A Light That Never Goes Out. When the Smiths split in 1987, it wasn't just the fans who were heartbroken. Bassist Andy Rourke says the band were too, and particularly Morrissey.
When we split up, well, it hit us all hard, but I think it hit Morrissey really hard. I think we all loved each other, but obviously Johnny and Morrissey were a lot closer.
It was just him on his own without Johnny for the very first time.
Joe Slee, who worked closely with the Smiths at Rough Trade Records, remembers what Morrissey was like in the immediate aftermath. Here she is talking to the BBC in 2007.
I think it was incredibly hard for him. He was quite heartbroken actually at the breakup of that partnership at that time, and didn't probably fully accept what had happened, but with total determination decided to just carry on making records.
After the band's breakup, Morrissey gave his 1988 debut solo album the title Viva Hate. Some in the press couldn't help but interpret it as a deliberate provocation.
While Morrissey launched his solo career, Johnny Marr returned to what he loved most, playing guitar. And the offers came quickly.
You know, do you want to make this record? Do you want to come and play on these songs? And the Talking Heads was one. And then I got a call saying the Pretenders guitarist left, would you like to do 15 gigs or something? And it was great, it was out of England and I just got to play guitar, I wasn't even playing my songs, and that was brilliant.
Don't get me wrong, if I'm looking kind of dazzled.
And then Matt Johnson called me up and he just said, you know, come and be in the verse.
The beaten generation, the beaten generation, reared on a diet of prejudice and mist.
And me and Bernard got electronic together.
I've been getting away with it all my life. Getting away with it all my life.
Despite the focus on their new musical careers, Marr and Morrissey did at one point briefly reconnect. Here's Johnny speaking in the late 90s.
We got together after a few years. I wanted that relationship resolved because we went through a lot together. So it just seemed ridiculous as grown men that we couldn't resolve it, you know. We called each other a couple of times and then we met up a couple of times and it was all very nice. It was lovely. So it's kind of resolved.
Morrissey and Marr may have buried the hatchet in the 90s, but the same couldn't be said for their relationship with the rhythm section, who now found themselves in some financial difficulty.
It's only money that gets between people, and that's a sad thing, really.
This is Andy Rourke, also talking in the late 90s.
2 years after we'd split up, any monies that we would usually get was being held from me and Mike. So I was skint, I didn't have anywhere to live. We were both pretty much penniless.
In the years after the split, there appeared to be a difference in opinion about who was owed what. Mike Joyce.
When the Smiths split up, I spoke to Johnny about getting the money sorted out, and he said, Morrissey's dragging his feet. I spoke to Morrissey, and Morrissey said, Johnny's dragging his feet.
2 years after the split, Mike and Andy sued Morrissey and Marr. They argued that, beyond songwriting royalties, they were entitled to an equal 25% share of the band's earnings. It didn't help that their names weren't on the Smiths' original contract, but up to that point, they'd been receiving 10% of what was coming in.
My biggest gripe is the fact that I thought that me and Andy should only get 10%. Well, I was in the back of the van, I did the gigs,
As we heard in episode 5, Morrissey and Marr felt the percentage split had been agreed verbally, but crucially, nothing was ever written down.
So I thought I'd best kind of try and sort this out myself. I want 25%, and Johnny Morrissey said no.
But realising the legal wrangling could take years, Andy chose a different path and settled out of court.
I just met my wife, and we wanted to get married basically and get a house. We had this carrot of £83,000 dangled in front of us, which was called a settlement in inverted commas, but all it was 10% backdated for 2 years. It was what was not in dispute anyway.
But where Andy settled, Mike pressed on, taking the case to court. Here's Johnny Marr talking in 1999.
10 years after the event, 12 years after the event, there's a court case where one of the band's saying, I want more money. I didn't know what I was getting. Spend 5 years with somebody and not know what you're getting is incredible, I think. Do you know, that court case was horrible, and I rather wish I hadn't been dragged into that situation. And it was really ugly, but maybe it took that to put a full stop at the end of it, you know.
On the Strand in London in December 1996, after nearly 10 years, Mike, Morrissey, Johnny and Andy are reunited. But this time, the old friends were on opposite sides.
When we actually got to court in 96, I felt as though somebody had spiked my drink. I just felt it was such a weird experience to go through. Morrissey opened the door for me as I was coming through, and he kind of jokingly pretended to shut the door and, you know, a bit of joking and stuff. And obviously we started to realise exactly what was going down and the seriousness of it. When we went in, we stood up and the clerk of the court said, all rise, Joyce versus Morrissey and others. And I thought, oh, this is me and my friends. And I hated it. I hated every single bloody minute of it. But it couldn't be sorted out any other way.
After 7 long and bitter days in court, the judge eventually ruled in favour of Mike Joyce.
As soon as we came out, Radio 1 were there, and TV, and loads of microphones in my face. It's like, were you swindled, were you cheated? And there was no triumphalism at all. I felt dead.
Despite everything that happened, Mike and Andy remained open to the idea of a reunion. And here they are talking in 2007.
If Morrissey and Marr came in the door now and said, would you like to do something together, then I'd say yes. I'm pretty sure I'd say yes.
You know, if both their hearts were behind it, I can't think of anything better.
But after the court case, Morrissey made his feelings clear. In his 2013 autobiography, he wrote, each man kills the thing he loves, and Joyce had murdered the Smiths. Andy would eventually be reunited with Johnny on stage on several occasions in the years that followed, playing Smith songs for adoring fans, but never with Mike and never with Morrissey.
A bit of news just to bring you this morning that's just popped up on my social media feed. Very sad news from the world of music. Johnny Marr has tweeted that Andy Rourke, previously from the Smiths, people of our generation will know only too well, has died. Johnny Marr writes in this tweet, it's with deep sadness we announce the passing of Andy Rourke after a lengthy illness with pancreatic cancer. Andy will be remembered as a kind and beautiful soul by those who knew him, and as a supremely gifted musician by music fans. We request privacy at this sad time. We'll talk a little bit.
In 2023, Andy Rourke died aged just 59 after a long battle with cancer. In tributes online, Mike described him as the funniest, sweetest lad I had the pleasure of knowing. Morrissey wrote that Andy will never die as long as his music is heard. He didn't ever know his own power, and nothing that he played had been played by someone else. Here's Andy speaking in the late 90s, reflecting on his time in the Smiths.
It's something I'm hugely proud of, obviously. My son and my daughter, John and Martine, their mates are like heavily into the Smiths, which surprises me. So I'm hugely proud of that.
The rest of the band also look back on their time in the Smiths with pride and a sense of awe at what they achieved.
In a way, I'm glad that it did end where it did, because the legacy of what we did do, as far as I'm concerned, is untouchable.
Do you have fond memories of being in the Smiths?
Very fond memories, yes. There are some horrendous
black clouds, but for the most part the making of the music was constant and rapid, and we were a law unto ourselves. Every few months there were great victories.
You know, what's happened with the Smiths is like there's been so much concentration on the negative side of it. You know, I've talked about some of it, the downside, and it was there, you know. But we had a really fantastic time. Our dreams were fulfilled and more, and we went through a lot together.
And he's not wrong, is he? The Smiths were a revelation, a one-off. The impact that they had on their fans, not to mention the wider music scene, was extraordinary, really, in such a short space of time. And that's why I think we can't let it go, and also partly why people are still so riveted by the relationship or lack of relationship between Johnny and Morrissey even today. As recently as 2024, in the latest twist in the Smiths' tale, Morrissey revealed that he had accepted a lucrative offer to reform the band, but that Johnny had ignored it. Johnny's response: "I didn't ignore it, I said no." Cue a fortnight's worth of tit-for-tat stories from the two camps about everything from the offer to reunite to the copyright of the band's name. And with every post, more and more people became desperate to see the Smiths again, just as, ironically, the very idea of a reunion seemed to become less and less likely. But that is where we are. Maybe it was always going to end this way.
And yet it all started with something simple but rare. Two kindred spirits drawn together in the first rush of creative chemistry, intoxicated by the possibilities they saw in each other. Here is Johnny Marr talking about Morrissey in 1999.
He was different with me than he was with everybody else, and I was different with him than I was with anyone else. We could really let our guard down and sort of be ourselves, really. He was just a really inspired, obsessed guy. Me and him would just get into these, like, you know, really long 3-4 hour discussions about, you know, the meaning of life, death and the universe, and anything that was in my private life he respected and kept away from, and anything in his I respected and kept away from.
And here's Morrissey speaking to the BBC back in 1984.
I feel that our music is so strong and quite emotional that you have to have some very serious cemented link with musicians, otherwise it can't come out that way. So I want the Smiths to be around for quite a long time with the 4 members of the group, because that is so solid. Regardless of what else happens on the outside, we certainly will be around for a long time.
Also for me, Steve, their influence is pretty much consistent in so many of the bands that I've been a fan of since the 90s when I was a teenager and I first came across them. I loved Pavement. They found the Smiths through college radio in the States. I am married to someone who was in a Sheffield band called High Hazels, and he found the Smiths through the Arctic Monkeys. And then my nephews, they love the Smiths now, but they found them through Fontaines DC. They, arguably, more than any other band, shaped the sound, style and sensibility of what would eventually be known as indie music. Reunion or not, it's clear that theirs is a light that will never go out.
The Rise and Fall of the Smiths is a Tempo and Talker production for BBC Sounds. It was presented by Steve Lamack
and me, Elizabeth Holker. It was written and produced by Tom Pooley, and the executive producer was Craig Templeton-Smith. Original music and sound design from Coach Conrad. For the BBC, the commissioner was Will Wilkin, and the commissioning producers were Hannah Clapham and John Hilcock.
With big thanks to all the BBC presenters and producers who interviewed the band over the years, and to David Hyde and Colin Waddle from the BBC's archive curation team for helping source much of the audio you heard.
The Smiths were approached but declined to take part. Morrissey disputes some of the recollections featured.